Captain Park Min-sung looked out from the viewport of the massive transport ship as it descended through the poisoned sky of Shator 9. The planet below looked like something from a nightmare. Dark purple clouds swirled in the atmosphere, and occasionally bolts of green lightning cracked across the sky. The surface was a strange mix of black rock, brown soil, and what looked like mountains made of crystal that glowed with an eerie blue light. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of 5,000 humans, men, women, and children, talking nervously among themselves. They all knew why they were here. They had been sent to die. The Calorian Empire had decided that humanity was a problem. Humans had been spreading across the galaxy too quickly, setting up colonies on planets that the ancient alien race believed belonged to them. The Calorians were powerful, old, and used to getting their way. When the human governments refused to stop their expansion, the Calorians decided on punishment so severe that it would make every other civilization think twice before challenging their power. They arrested 5,000 humans from the Kandor Prime colony and brought them here to Shator 9, a planet so hostile that nothing intelligent had ever survived on it for more than a few days. The transport ships landed with heavy thuds that everyone on board could feel. The Calorians had not been kind. They simply dropped the humans in basic shelters with limited supplies and told them they would leave an orbital station in space to monitor them. For 1 month, if any human tried to leave the planet, they would be shot down. After that month, the orbital station would leave, and the humans would be truly alone. Park Min-sung gathered the colony leaders in the largest shelter. Dr. Lee Hae-won was there, the colony's chief scientist. Choi Tai-ho was the head engineer. Kim Da-jin was a biologist who had studied many alien planets. Oh-ji-won handled all the colony's communications equipment. They sat in a circle in the dim light, listening to the terrible sounds from outside. Something large was screaming in the darkness. The sound was like nothing Park Min-sung had ever heard, a mix between a whale's call and an angry storm. "The food will last maybe 90 days if we are careful," said Choi Tae-ho, looking at a list on his computer. "The water processors can work, but the acid rain outside will destroy them within weeks. The shelters are good, but they will need constant repairs from the storm damage." Dr. Lee Hae-won was looking at her own readings from the planet. "The atmosphere is mostly nitrogen like Earth, but it has high levels of sulfuric compounds. The temperature swings from freezing at night to almost 60 degrees Celsius during the day. The radiation levels are 10 times higher than what we are used to." Kim Da-jin added, "I have already seen movement outside, large creatures. Some are the size of buildings. I tracked one on the sensors for an hour. It moved in a pattern, almost like it was hunting, but I do not know what it was hunting." The sounds from outside grew louder. Several people in other parts of the shelter screamed. Park Min-sung stood up and walked to a small window, looking out into the darkness. He could see shapes moving in the shadows. Huge shapes. He thought about the Calorians watching from space, waiting to see how long it would take for all these humans to die. They probably expected weeks, maybe months, if the humans were lucky and very smart. But Park Min-sung was not just smart, he was stubborn. And he was filled with something that the Calorians had perhaps not expected from their prisoners. He was filled with a strange kind of hope mixed with humor. "We are going to survive this," he said quietly, still looking out the window. Oh-ji-won laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "Captain, did you not hear what Dr. Lee said? The radiation will kill us. The creatures outside will kill us. The food will run out. In what way are we supposed to survive this?" Park Min-sung turned back to face them. He could see the fear in their eyes. These were smart people, all of them, smart enough to know how bad the situation truly was. "We are going to survive," he repeated, "because the Calorians sent us here to prove that humans cannot adapt. They sent us here to show the galaxy that we are weak. They want us to die quietly and give them the satisfaction of being right." He walked around the circle looking at each person. But what if we do not die quietly? What if we refuse to follow their script? Choi Tae-ho shook his head. With respect, Captain, hope is not a survival strategy. No, Park Min-sung agreed, but science is, adaptation is, hard work is, and maybe a little bit of madness will help too. He pointed to Dr. Lee Hae-won. You are going to find a way to fix the acid rain problem. Choi Tae-ho, you are going to figure out how to build structures that can survive these storms. Kim Da-jin, you are going to study those creatures and tell us what they do, what they eat, and what might kill them. And Oh Ji-won, you are going to fix that communication equipment because we need to let the galaxy know what is happening here. For the first time that day, Park Mi-soo spoke. She was a teacher by profession and had been listening quietly until now. And what will you do, Captain? Park Min-sung smiled, though it was a tired smile. I am going to make sure that everyone stays alive long enough to do their jobs. And then, when we have all survived, I am going to make sure the Calorians know about it. Outside, something crashed against the shelter wall. The metal bent inward slightly and everyone jumped. But it held. The creatures outside seemed to move on. The screaming faded into the distance, replaced by the sound of the acid rain which fell like bullets on the metal roof of the shelter. That night, in the darkness, Park Min-sung sat alone and thought about his plan. It was probably impossible, but he knew something that the Calorians did not understand about humans. Humans were not just smart. Humans were creative. Humans could find humor in terrible situations. Humans could look at an impossible problem and decide to solve it anyway, even if only to prove that they could. The Calorians had sent them to die, but humans had been surviving impossible situations for thousands of years, and they had always found new ways to do it. This time would be no different. This time those new ways might even make for an interesting story. In another shelter, 5,000 humans tried to sleep through the sounds of the alien night. In space above them, Calorian sensors watched and waited. They were very sure that all these humans would be dead within weeks. For the first time in a very long time, everyone was wrong about something very important, but no one knew it yet. 3 weeks had passed since the human colony arrived on Shader 9, and the first death had not happened yet. That fact alone surprised everyone, including Park Min-sung. They had lost people, yes. An old man had suffered a heart attack on the first day. A child had become sick from the stress and poor water quality. But Dr. Lee Hae-won had managed to save her. 2 workers had been injured in a storm, but Choi Tae-ho's shelter repairs had prevented a worse disaster. Yet no one had died from the planet itself, and that was important. Dr. Lee Hae-won was in her laboratory, really just a corner of the main shelter with some equipment and computers, when she finally broke the code to the acid rain problem. She had been studying the crystalline formations that covered much of the planet's surface. These crystals were strange. They were beautiful, with colors that ranged from blue to green to purple, and they seemed to absorb heat from the planet's sun. More importantly, when she analyzed them, she discovered they were a special kind of mineral that could neutralize acids. She mixed the crushed crystals with some of their limited water and poured the mixture into a special container. Then she put some of the colony's acid-damaged metal in the liquid. Within hours, the metal began to repair itself. The acid damage smoothed out like magic. It works, she whispered to herself, not believing what she was seeing. It actually works. Dr. Lee ran to find Park Min-sung. He was helping Choi Tae-ho with repairs to the shelter walls. When she told him the discovery, even Choi Tae-ho forgot about his work for a moment and stared at her. You can make acid protection from the planet itself? He asked. Better than that, Dr. Lee said, smiling. I can make it from the crystals. And there are thousands of those crystals all around us. We can make enough protective coating for all the shelters. We can even waterproof our water processors so they will last much longer. Park Min-sung felt something inside him shift. This was what he had hoped for. Not a miracle, but something better. A solution that came from understanding the problem. Choi Tai-ho was also discovering important things. He had been studying how the wind moved across the planet. Shader 9 was always windy. The storms were violent and frequent, but the wind itself was constant and powerful. He began to design wind turbines that could be built from the limited materials they had. More than that, he designed them to be strong enough to survive the storms while still turning in the wind. The first turbine was built on top of the main shelter, where the wind was strongest. When it started to spin, slowly at first and then faster, the entire colony gathered to watch. It was beautiful, in a strange way. That turbine meant power. Power meant heat. Heat meant survival. Kim Da-jin spent her days watching the creatures of Shator 9. She had not gotten any closer to the large ones. She was smart enough to know that would be dangerous, but she had studied them from safe distances. She began to understand their patterns. The largest creatures, the ones the size of mountains, came through the colony's area only once every 3 days. They always came at the same time. They always moved in the same direction. They seemed to be following something, perhaps moving toward food sources. She also discovered something strange. There were areas where these creatures never went. She marked them on maps and studied the differences between these areas and the places where the creatures roamed. The safe zones were hotter. They had more of the blue crystals. The soil composition was different. Kim Da-jin brought her findings to Park Min-sung. "The creatures are not random," she explained. "They follow patterns. If we understand their patterns, we can build in places where they do not go. We can predict when danger comes and prepare for it." This was valuable information. Park Min-sung realized that the planet was not pure chaos. It was a system. Like any system, it could be studied and understood. Oh Ji-won had been working on the communication equipment since the first day. The Calorians had taken most of the advanced transmitters, but they had left enough for basic communication with the orbital station. Oh Ji-won spent hours fixing damaged equipment and building small improvements. By the 3rd week, he had managed to get more power to the transmitters. He had also managed to listen to some of the broadcasts that traveled through space. The Calorians had announced the human exile to the galaxy. They had declared that Shator 9 was a prison planet, one of the most hostile places known to have intelligent life. They had told everyone that the humans would die quickly, and that this was justice for their expansion crimes. But Oh Ji-won noticed something interesting. The Calorians were checking on the humans very frequently. They were sending new sensors. They were reading the data constantly. It was almost like they were surprised the humans had not died yet. Young engineer Yoon Hae-il came to Park Min-sung with an idea one afternoon. Yoon was only 25 years old, but he was brilliant with machines. "Captain," he said, "I have been thinking about the planet's internal structure. Based on the seismic data we have, I think there might be heat deep underground. Geothermal heat. If we could drill down far enough, we might find a source of power that would never run out. It would be hot, clean, and constant." Park Min-sung asked, "How deep would we need to drill?" "Maybe 2 kilometers, Yoon said. "Maybe less. It is possible. Difficult, but possible." Park Min-sung approved the project. He started putting together a team of workers. They would need to build a drill from the materials they had. It would take weeks, maybe months. But if it worked, it would be another piece of survival that did not depend on the Calorians' mercy. By the end of the 3rd week, something surprising had happened. The colony had stopped dying. More than that, they had started building. Dr. Lee was training workers to collect and crush crystals for protective coating. Choi Tai-ho had started construction on a second wind turbine. Kim Da-jin was creating detailed maps of safe zones. Yoon Hae-il was gathering materials for the geothermal drill. And Oh Ji-won kept improving the communication systems, though he still did not know exactly what he would use them for. Park Mi-soo, the teacher, was also busy. She had started a school for the children. She wanted them to understand that this was not just a prison. This was their home now. It was a terrible home, a frightening home, but it was theirs. The children needed to believe in a future on this planet. In the evening, Park Min-sung stood on top of the main shelter and looked at the spinning wind turbine. Beyond it, he could see the dark landscape of Shator 9. The blue crystals glowed in the fading light. In the distance, he could hear the sounds of the creatures, but they sounded far away, not threatening. Just there, part of this world. The Calorians had sent humans here to die. But humans had done what humans always did. They had looked at an impossible situation and started solving problems one at a time. They had looked at death and found ways around it. They had looked at suffering and found meaning. Park Min-sung smiled. The Calorians were watching from space, expecting a sad story of human failure, but they were not going to get that story. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The wind turbine spun faster as the evening wind picked up, and in the shelters below, 5,000 humans prepared for another night on Shator 9. But this night was different from the first night. This night, they had hope. This night, they had proven they could survive. And that was the beginning of everything that came after. 6 months had passed, and the humans of Shator 9 had done the impossible. They had not just survived. They had created a civilization. The main shelter had been expanded 3 times. New shelters had been built in safe zones identified by Kim De-jin. The geothermal drill had finally broken through to hot water deep underground, and now the colony had endless heat and power. Gardens had been planted in greenhouse domes, and the first crops were beginning to grow. But something more important happened during those 6 months. A message came from space. Oh Ji-won received it on a normal evening while he was working on the communication systems. At first, he thought the message was broken or corrupted because the sender's identification was strange. It came from within the Calorian Empire, but it was not from the government. It was from an individual, a Calorian named Vessel Keth-Mora. The message was simple. You should be dead. Why aren't you? Oh Ji-won brought the message to Park Min-sung immediately. They sat together in a small office, reading the message over and over. It was clearly a question from someone who was confused and curious. But it was also something more dangerous. It was evidence that the Calorian Empire's certainty about human death was cracking. This is important, Park Min-sung said slowly. Someone in the Calorian society is noticing that we are alive. They are questioning the official story. Over the next week, Oh Ji-won and Park Min-sung carefully composed a reply. They decided to tell the truth. They explained about Dr. An Lee's discovery with the crystals. They talked about the wind turbines and the geothermal energy. They mentioned the maps and the safety zones. But most importantly, they talked about human nature. They talked about the refusal to accept defeat. They talked about looking at problems and solving them. They talked about working together and building something from nothing. The response came faster this time. Vessel Keth-Mora seemed excited. The Calorian wanted to know more. How had they figured out the crystals? How had they learned the creature patterns? How had they built wind turbines in such harsh conditions? Park Min-sung realized something important in those conversations. The Calorian named Keth-Mora was not like the others. This alien cared about understanding humanity. This alien had begun to doubt the Empire's official reason for sending humans to Shator 9, and more than that, this alien was beginning to think that perhaps the Empire had made a mistake. Park Min-sung called together his leadership team. He had a strange idea, and he knew they would think he was crazy. He brought them all together. Dr. Lee Hae-won, Choi Tai-ho, Kim Da-jin, Oh Ji-won, Yoon Hae-il, and Park Mi-soo. He also brought in some younger people who had become important. There was Ro Nari, a brilliant young woman who helped with the engineering projects. There was Lee Ji-ho, who managed the agricultural projects. "I want to create something," Park Min-sung told them. "Something that tells the story of what we have done here. Something that shows the galaxy what humans are truly capable of." Park Mi-soo immediately understood. "You want to tell our story?" "More than that," Park Min-sung said. "I want to make it into something that no alien civilization can ignore. I want to make it beautiful. I want to make it impressive. I want to make it undeniable." Ronari asked, "What kind of thing are you talking about?" Park Min-sung smiled. "A tourism brochure." The room went silent. Then Yoon Hae-il started laughing. He laughed until tears came to his eyes. "You want to advertise this nightmare planet?" he asked between laughs. "Yes," Park Min-sung said. "We want to make the planet that was supposed to kill us into a destination. We want to show the galaxy that humans do not just survive, we thrive." Dr. Lee Hae-won began to understand. The psychological impact would be enormous. We would be telling everyone that this was not punishment. We would be saying that the Calorians failed. "Exactly," Park Min-sung confirmed. "The Calorians want us dead. They want this to be a sad story about human weakness. But what if we make it a story about human strength? What if we make it a story so impressive that other civilizations want to visit our planet?" Park Mi-soo leaned forward. "I can write it. I can make it beautiful. But we need to make it true. We cannot lie to the galaxy." "We will not lie," Park Min-sung promised. "We will just tell the truth in the most interesting way possible." For the next 3 months, teams worked constantly. Park Mi-soo wrote the brochure with careful words that were both honest and inspiring. She wrote about the dangers of Shator 9 in ways that made them sound like adventures. She wrote about the acid rain as climate challenges that test human resilience. She wrote about the massive creatures as incredible wildlife viewing opportunities. Yoon Hae-il and his team created beautiful images. They took photographs of the blue crystals at sunset. They recorded videos of the wind turbines spinning against the purple sky. They filmed the geothermal power station. They created pictures of humans working together, eating together, building together. Kim Da-jin wrote a section called Meet the Locals, describing the creatures of Shator 9 with respect and scientific accuracy. She made the dangerous animals sound fascinating rather than terrifying. Dr. Lee Hae-won contributed a section on the science behind human adaptation. She explained how the crystals worked, how the wind power was harvested, and how the colony had solved each problem they faced. Ro Nari and Lee Ji-ho created a food section describing the new crops they had grown and the ways they had adapted recipes using local ingredients. They made it sound delicious. Oh Ji-won prepared the communication systems for what was coming. He knew that once this brochure was sent out, everything would change. The silence around Shator 9 would break. The story would reach every corner of the galaxy. Park Min-sung reviewed everything once. The brochure was perfect. It was honest. It was impressive. It was creative. And most importantly, it was true. Every word, every image, every claim was something they had actually accomplished. Park Min-sung then walked through the colony. He saw the wind turbines spinning. He saw the greenhouse domes full of growing food. He saw humans working on building better shelters. He saw children playing safely in the protected zones. He saw a civilization where 6 months ago there had been only despair. "Tomorrow," he told Park Mi-soo, "we send the message. Tomorrow the galaxy learns that humans do not fail. Tomorrow, the nightmare world becomes our triumph." That night, Park Min-sung stood under the stars and looked up at the Calorian orbital station. He knew they were watching. He knew they were expecting news of mass death and human suffering. But tomorrow, they would receive something completely different. They would receive proof that human beings could look at any challenge, no matter how impossible, and find a way to not just survive, but to prosper. The Calorians had tried to erase humanity from the galaxy by sending them to Shator 9. But they had not understood something very important about the humans they sent. Humans did not just survive. Humans told stories about their survival. Humans made those stories matter. Humans made them shine. And tomorrow, the entire galaxy was going to hear that story. Park Min-sung stood in front of the communication transmitter, and his hand trembled slightly as he prepared to send the signal. This was not nervousness about the signal itself. The signal would work. Oh Ji-won had made sure of that. His trembling came from knowing that what he was about to do would change everything. Once this message reached the galaxy, there would be no taking it back. The Calorians' plan would be revealed as a failure, and humanity would be revealed as something the Calorians had never expected. "Ready?" Oh Ji-won asked from beside him. "Ready," Park Min-sung confirmed. He pressed the transmission button. In that moment, across 1,000 light-years of space, through communication networks that connected 100 civilizations, a signal began to travel. It carried not words, but data. It carried images, text, recordings, and videos. It carried the tourism brochure to every corner of the galaxy. The first response came within hours. Vessel Keth Mora, the Calorian who had been questioning the Empire's narrative, sent a simple message. "This is real. All of this is real." "All of this is real," Park Min-sung replied. Then the responses came faster. Merchants wanted to know if they could trade with the humans. Scientists wanted to study the colony's methods. Tourism companies wanted to organize visits. News organizations wanted interviews. Every species in the galaxy suddenly wanted to know more about the humans who were supposed to be dead, but were instead thriving. The Calorian Empire did not immediately respond. For 3 days, there was silence from the official government channels. Park Min-sung and his team understood what was happening. The Empire was in crisis. They had publicly announced that Shator 9 was a dead end, a place where humans would perish. But now the entire galaxy knew that humans had not just survived. They had created something magnificent. When the Calorians finally did respond, it was with denial. They claimed the images were fake. They claimed the transmissions were deceptions sent by enemies of the Empire to damage their reputation. But everyone who received the transmission could see the data itself. The data was too detailed, too consistent, and too verifiable to be false. The Empire's denial only made them look worse. On Shator 9, the colony erupted in celebration when they learned about the responses. People cheered. They cried. They held each other. For the first time since arriving on this nightmare world, they could believe that their sacrifice had purpose. They could believe that their struggle had meaning. They could believe that they were not going to be forgotten. But the real changes came quickly. Within a week, the Calorian Empire announced something that shocked everyone. They were removing the orbital station that was supposed to prevent humans from leaving the planet. The official reason was that they did not want to waste resources on a failed punishment program. But the real reason was clear. The Empire was embarrassed. They wanted humanity to disappear from the news cycle as quickly as possible. Without the orbital station blocking them, the first visitors began to arrive. A merchant ship from the Zarvun species came to see if they could trade. A research vessel from the Calorian Empire itself, crewed by scientists who opposed their government's narrative, came to study the human colony. Tourism companies began to plan trips. The first alien visitor to walk on Shator 9's surface was a Zarvun merchant named Krell Tha. The merchant was curious, intelligent, and interested in human culture. Park Min-sung showed Krell Tha around the colony. They walked through the greenhouse domes where crops were growing. They visited the geothermal power station. They climbed to the observation decks where visitors could safely watch the massive creatures moving across the landscape. "This is remarkable," Krell Tha said over and over. "Remarkable. Your species took a place designed to destroy you and made it into a home. I have traveled to 100 worlds, and I have never seen anything like this. I want to bring my family here. I want to show them what is possible." "You are welcome," Park Min-sung told him, "but understand that this is not an easy place. It is still dangerous. It is still challenging." Kreltha smiled. "Yes, but that is what makes it special. That is why your achievement is so impressive. Anyone can survive in a paradise. Only the remarkable can thrive in a nightmare." Within a month, Shator 9 had been officially renamed New Haven by the human colony. Within 2 months, the first permanent alien residents had arrived. Within 3 months, small businesses had been established. A restaurant opened that served human food and alien food together. A trading post was built. A research station was constructed. Park Min-sung realized that something incredible was happening. The Nightmareworld was becoming a meeting place. It was becoming a symbol. Other species were traveling to Shator 9 not to see humans suffer, but to see humans succeed. They came to understand adaptation. They came to understand resilience. They came to understand what happened when a species was given an impossible challenge and refused to fail. The Calorian Empire tried to save face by claiming they had always planned for humans to colonize harsh worlds. They suggested that perhaps Shator 9 was an intentional test of human capability, not a punishment. But everyone knew the truth. Everyone had received their original message about punishment. Everyone understood that this was a humiliation for the Calorians and a triumph for humanity. Park Mi-soo began to receive requests for interviews. News organizations from a dozen species wanted to talk to the person who had written the tourism brochure. She gave several interviews, and in each one, she told the simple truth. Humans had been given a problem, and they had solved it. Humans had been sent to a nightmare, and they had made it home. The most interesting development came from vessel Keth Mora. The Calorian scientist approached Park Min-sung with an unusual request. "I want to defect," Keth Mora said. "I want to live on your world and study your adaptation methods. I want to understand how your species does what it does." Park Min-sung welcomed Keth Mora to the colony. The Calorian brought with him years of scientific knowledge about alien biology and chemistry. This knowledge, combined with the human's practical experience, created something powerful. Together, they began to develop new technologies and new understandings of how to survive in extreme environments. One afternoon, Park Min-sung stood on the highest observation point of the colony and looked out at the landscape of Shator 9. The blue crystals glowed in the sunlight. The wind turbines spun steadily. In the distance, he could see one of the massive creatures moving slowly across the plains. It was beautiful, in a strange and terrible way. Ronari joined him on the platform. She held a document in her hands. "Captain," she said, "we have been getting requests from other worlds, other harsh planets, other places where previous colonies have failed. They want to know if humans will go there and try to build on them." "What are you suggesting?" Park Min-sung asked. "I am suggesting that we send humans to those worlds, not as punishment, but as pioneers. We have learned how to survive impossible places. We should teach that skill to others. We should help build new worlds." Park Min-sung took the document from Ronari's hands and read through the list of worlds. There were 12 names, 12 planets that had been written off as uninhabitable. 12 places where life had never taken root. He smiled. The Calorians had sent humanity to Shator 9 to erase them, but they had done something completely different. They had created pioneers. They had created explorers. They had created a people who could look at anything, no matter how terrible, and find a way to make it work. "Start planning," Park Min-sung told Ronari. "We are going to need ships. We are going to need supplies. We are going to need brave people who want to do what we did here." As Ronari left to begin the planning, Park Min-sung remained on the observation platform. Below him, a new civilization was being born. A civilization built not on conquest, not on wealth, not on military power, but on something much more powerful. A civilization built on the simple human ability to look at a nightmare and refuse to be defeated by it. The Colorians had made a terrible mistake when they sent these humans to Shator 9. They had meant to eliminate a problem. Instead, they had created something remarkable. They had created hope. 1 year after the tourism brochure had been sent to the galaxy, Shator 9 had become something that nobody could have predicted. The planet was no longer a punishment. It was no longer a nightmare. For the 5,000 original human colonists, it had become home. For the thousands of visitors who came every month, it had become a wonder. For the rest of the galaxy, it had become a symbol. The Colorian Empire sent a delegation to meet with Park Min-sung. They arrived in an official ship, with official guards and with official coldness. They wanted to talk about what came next. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to control the narrative. The lead negotiator was a high-ranking Colorian official named Vex Throne. This Colorian had no interest in understanding humanity. Vex Thron only cared about power and reputation. When Vex Thron sat across from Park Min-sung in the colony's new meeting hall, the tension was obvious. "Your presence on Shator 9 is creating problems for the Colorian Empire," Vex Thron said directly. "You are making us look foolish. You are making our decision to send you here appear cruel and unnecessary." "That is because it was cruel and unnecessary," Park Min-sung replied calmly. "You sent 5,000 people to die. We refused to die. That reveals the truth about your decision, not a problem with our success." Vex Throne leaned back and studied Park Min-sung carefully. "You are clever. More clever than we expected. This is exactly why the Empire saw you as a threat." "We were never a threat to you," Park Min-sung said. "We were simply people trying to expand. We were simple colonists, not military forces. You chose to see us as an enemy because your pride could not accept competition." "Perhaps," Vex Thron acknowledged. "But the situation now is more complicated. The galaxy is watching. Other species are comparing human resilience to Colorian cruelty. Your tourism brochure has become famous. There is even entertainment media being produced about your colony now. The narrative has become something that we must address." Park Min-sung smiled. "Then perhaps we can make a deal." "What kind of deal?" Vex Thron asked suspiciously. "You want the galaxy to stop seeing you as cruel. You want your reputation repaired. You want to control this story. But you cannot do any of those things because the story is true. The only way forward is to accept the truth and move on." Park Min-sung stood and walked to a window. The blue crystals of Shator 9 were glowing in the evening light. "I propose this. The Colorian Empire officially recognizes the human colony on Shator 9 as a sovereign settlement. You grant us independence. In exchange, we will emphasize in all future communications that the punishment on Shator 9 was misguided, but that it led to unexpected positive outcomes. We will suggest that the Empire learn from the mistake. We will not make you look worse, but we will also not erase the truth." Vex Thron was quiet for a long time. Finally, the Colorian said, "The Empire's government will need to approve this, but I believe it may be acceptable. You have made us look foolish, but you have also revealed something important about your species. Your strength is not in military power or advanced technology. Your strength is in adaptation and persistence. The Empire respects power, even when it is not the kind of power we expected." "Is that acceptance?" Park Min-sung asked. "It is the beginning of acceptance," Vex Thron confirmed. Within weeks, the agreement was official. Shator 9 was declared a free human settlement. The Colorian Empire publicly stated that the punishment had been a test of human capability and the results had exceeded their expectations. It was a face-saving measure, but it worked. The Colorian Empire's reputation, damaged but not destroyed, began to stabilize. More importantly, the human colony gained freedom. They could trade freely with any species. They could welcome visitors without restriction. They could expand their settlements across the planet without worry of intervention. The changes came quickly. More humans arrived, people who had heard the stories and wanted to be part of something remarkable. Within the next year, the population of New Haven grew from 5,000 to 15,000. More settlements were built on Shator 9, each one in safe zones identified by Kim De-jin. The planet that was supposed to be empty began to develop its own culture, its own identity, its own future. Dr. Lee Hae-won opened a research institute dedicated to studying extreme environment adaptation. Scientists from 100 species came to work there. They studied the humans' methods. They learned how crystal compounds could neutralize acids. They discovered new applications for geothermal energy. The institute became a center of learning and innovation that benefited not just humans, but every species that visited. Choi Tai-ho retired from direct engineering work, but spent his time training the next generation of builders. Young engineers from alien species came to learn human engineering techniques. The blend of human innovation with alien knowledge created new structures and new technologies. Kim De-jin's work expanded beyond Shator 9. She began to consult with other colonies and settlements across the galaxy, helping them understand how to live on difficult worlds. Her maps and her methods were copied by dozens of alien civilizations. She became the galaxy's expert on surviving impossible places. Yoon Hae-il led expeditions to the 11 other harsh planets that had been identified. Humans and volunteers from allied species traveled to these worlds and began what Yoon called adaptive colonization projects. They applied the lessons learned on Shator 9 to new and different environments. Some planets were frozen, some had toxic atmospheres, some had unusual gravity or radiation levels, but all of them could be lived on if you approached them with the right attitude and the right knowledge. Park Mi-soo, who had written the original tourism brochure, became a famous author throughout the galaxy. She wrote books about human resilience. She wrote stories about the settlement of New Haven. She created works that were studied in schools on 100 worlds. She also established a writing institute on Shator 9, where young writers from many species came to learn how to tell stories that mattered. Ro Na-ri became the leader of the second generation of humans on Shator 9. She was now the chief administrator of the planet's settlements. Under her leadership, New Haven transformed from a barely surviving colony into a thriving civilization. She negotiated trade agreements. She welcomed new residents. She planned for the future. She made Shator 9 not just a place where humans survived, but a place where humans and aliens worked together to create something new. 5 years after the arrival on Shator 9, Park Min-sung stood in the colony's first museum. The walls were lined with images and artifacts from those early days. There was a display of the original turbine parts. There were samples of the crystalline material that had saved them. There was even a framed copy of the tourism brochure that had changed everything. A group of young students, both human and alien, were being guided through the museum by a historian. The historian explained how humans had arrived on the planet facing certain death. He explained how they had solved impossible problems. He explained how they had refused to accept defeat. "Why did they not give up?" asked a young alien student, something with blue skin and multiple eyes. The historian smiled. "Because that is not what humans do. Humans have a quality called stubbornness combined with hope. When you tell a human that something is impossible, they do not accept it. They look for ways around it. They look for ways through it, and usually they find a way." Park Min-sung listened to this explanation and felt something shift inside him. The story of Shator 9 had become bigger than him. It had become part of the galaxy's understanding of what humanity was. It had become proof that resilience was not just a survival tool. It was a defining characteristic. That evening, Park Min-sung had dinner with the original team that had made everything possible. Dr. Lee Hai-wan was there. Choi Tai-ho was there. Kim Da-jin was there. Oh Ji-won was there. Park Mi-soo was there. Yoon Hai-il was there. Ro Na-ri was there. "We did it," Park Mi-soo said simply, raising a glass of a beverage made from local plants and human-grown grains. "We took a nightmare and made it home." "We took a punishment and made it a triumph," Choi Tae-ho added. "We proved that humans cannot be broken," Dr. Lee Hae-won said. They drank together, and in that moment, all of them understood that this was not really about Shatter 9 anymore. This was about something much larger. This was about the nature of humanity itself. This was about what happened when you gave humans an impossible situation and expected them to fail. Humans did not fail. Humans adapted. Humans persisted. Humans looked at nightmares and transformed them into stories of triumph. Outside the dining hall, Shator 9 continued its eternal dance of storms and survival. The blue crystals glowed. The wind turbines spun. The creatures moved across the plains following their ancient paths. And in the shelters and settlements, humans and aliens worked together, built together, lived together, creating something that had never existed before. The Calorians had tried to erase humanity by sending them to this world. Instead, they had created something that would be remembered forever. They had created heroes. They had created pioneers. They had created a story that would inspire countless species for generations to come. And all it had taken was the simple human refusal to accept that anything was impossible.